Taiwan's top trade negotiator is confident about lowering U.S. tariffs even as those levies start to bite. Chinese President Xi Jinping ramps up claims over Taiwan as the PRC celebrates its 76th National Day. Meanwhile, human rights activists in Taipei speak out for oppressed minority groups in China. Plus, a new report shows that Taiwan may be the largest importer of a Russian fossil fuel, raising ethical concerns about helping to fund Moscow's war on Ukraine. Welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yvonne Yang. Taiwan's lead tariff negotiator says Taipei and Washington are getting closer to a trade deal, but moving more semiconductor production to the United States is not on the table. Leslie Liao reports.
In the early hours of Wednesday, Vice Premier Zheng Lijun arrived back in Taiwan from her latest round of trade negotiations with Washington. And she had a message to deliver, that Taiwan will not agree to move half of its chip production to the U.S.
我想这是美方的想法我方谈判团队从未做出晶片5.5分的承诺请大家放心。那这一次我们也没有讨论这一项的议题那我们也不会答应这样的条件。
Semiconductors have been a focal point of U.S. trade talks, as Taiwan produces the vast majority of the world's most advanced chips. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick recently floated the 50-50 agreement, which would have Taiwan produce one semiconductor in America for every chip it exports to the U.S. The idea has been criticized by some opposition lawmakers in Taiwan. It comes at a time when Vice Premier Zheng is trying to negotiate with Washington to lower U.S. President Donald Trump's so-called reciprocal tariffs on Taiwan. Trump has slapped a 20% levy on top of existing duties for Taiwanese goods entering the U.S. Taiwan is also concerned about tariffs specifically aimed at semiconductors, by far the country's biggest export. Trump has ordered an investigation into semiconductor imports and their impact on U.S. national security. After that's done, he may impose a so-called Section 232 tariff on them. Taipei has time and again emphasized that the 20% rate is temporary, and that Zheng's team is working with its American counterpart to lower that number.
我们取得在对等关税及232条款相关关税优惠待遇以及供应链合作上有完整的共识之后我们就会进入总结会议来达成台美的贸易协议。
As Taipei works to conclude the trade agreement with Washington, at home, the tariffs have already had serious effects on the workforce. According to a recent Labor Ministry survey, over 300 companies have furloughed close to 8,000 total people because of U.S. tariffs. But on the figurative sidelines of the tariff saga, Taiwan and the U.S. continue to strike other deals.
Having discussed with my colleagues at the United States Department of Agriculture, we have decided to take the next step in allowing Taiwanese producers of pineapple access into the U.S. market.
Lindbergh is leading a delegation of American businesses to Taiwan to sell more products. The two sides also signed a memorandum to increase U.S. milk imports to Taiwan. But the topic of tariffs continues to weigh on Taiwan-U.S. exchanges as a Taiwanese lawmaker asked the U.S.'s de facto embassy in Taiwan to advocate for lower tariffs during the memorandum signing. Whether or not these deals will secure any goodwill from Washington will be up to the Trump administration. But they do come at a pivotal time, as Zheng said, that tariff negotiations are entering the endgame. Luffy Li and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus.
On China's National Day, Chinese President Xi Jinping has some words for Taiwan and what appears to be a warning for the international community. Cadence Coranta has more.
As China celebrates its National Day on the 76th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China, Chinese President Xi Jinping addresses the nation, discussing the Chinese Communist Party's history and future plans, and, as usual, some firm words on Taiwan.
要深化两岸交流合作，坚决反对台独分裂行径和外部势力干涉，坚决捍卫国家主权和领土完整。
China claims Taiwan and has threatened to take it by force if necessary. Taiwan rejects those claims. In a statement, Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council, which handles relations with China, reiterated that Taiwan's government will continue to defend its national sovereignty and the cross-strait status quo. Xi's warning against external interference in cross-strait affairs comes at a time when China has stepped up efforts to isolate Taiwan diplomatically, repeatedly denouncing countries that allow Taiwanese officials to visit or have any contact with Taiwan's government. It also comes after a report that Xi is planning to push U.S. President Donald Trump to adopt a tougher stance on Taiwan as part of its trade deal with the U.S., prompting one State Department official to say the U.S. position on Taiwan has not changed. Amid these tactics, analysts say international concern is growing.
外部他们对于中国在整个台海这个单方面施加压力的做法顾虑越来越高，所以他们可能介入的用不同的方式介入程度会越来越高。反过来就是说，也会造成中国内部这种顾虑也会越来越多。
With his warning, Xi appears to be sending a message to the international community not to get involved in cross-strait affairs. Within Taiwan, there's also some controversy over several Taiwanese entertainers who shared social media posts from Chinese state media congratulating the country on its National Day. Those posts are getting attention because Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council has in the past issued warnings to Taiwanese entertainers who reshared pro-unification posts from Chinese state media, arguing they violated Taiwan laws that ban cooperation with the Chinese government. In a statement, the council said it's monitoring entertainers' National Day posts this year to make sure they don't include elements that cross lines, including degrading Taiwan, advocating for eliminating the country's sovereignty, or advocating the use of force against it. All this as China's government marks a milestone, one that has implications not just for China, but also for Taiwan, a sensitive day for cross-strait relations. Patrick Chen and Cadence Quaranta for TaiwanPlus.
In Taipei, Tibetans and Hong Kongers are standing alongside Taiwanese lawmakers to protest China's National Day. They say they're giving a voice to those of China's 1.4 billion people not celebrating the holiday, but don't have the right to express their political opinions. Tiffany Wang reports.
抗中反压迫，抗中反压迫，人权不退让，人权不退让。
The leaders of overseas Hong Kong, Uyghur, and Tibetan human rights groups are calling attention to the plight of their communities on China's National Day, which is celebrated on October 1st. They say this is a painful day for minority communities in China, including Tibetans and Uyghurs, who face oppression of their cultures under the Chinese Communist Party.
西藏人可能不想笑也是应该要笑的，那个是中共控制底下，不快乐也是让假装一个快乐。 我们中共底下的苦难中的人已经来台湾，那我们在这边一起团结的这些活动，我们希望有一天会达到大家的目的。虽然知道每一个国家的情况不一样，西藏的情况不一样，台湾的情况不一样，我香港，我们大家的情况不一样，但是我们要面对是中共的。所以今天我们在从民主国家上要让世界知道。 中共说的跟做的完全不一样。
A Taiwanese democracy activist who had spent 5 years in Chinese jail for breaching national security laws says China's reach extends beyond its borders.
中国力量的崛起，伴随而来的是对世界输出威权统治的技术，强化独裁力量的稳固，以及对周边国家的武力威胁。10月1号是中华人民共和国的国庆，但是对世界来说， 这是人类和平的灾难，世界文明的耻辱。
China claims Taiwan as its own and has not ruled out the use of force to take it. During national holidays, Beijing often emphasizes its claims to Taiwan. And with frequent Chinese military activity near Taiwan's airspace and waters, there are people here calling out the threat that China poses to Taiwan's democratic systems and saying that they'll continue to stand with communities that face oppression. Klein Wang and Tiffany Wang in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's defense minister says sea trials for the country's first self-made submarine are behind schedule.
前航的前置的准备跟测试现在进度确实有些落后。那所以要在11月前完成交件，确实还蛮有挑战性的，所以我们会持续努力。
Gu was speaking as surface trials for the $800 million Haikun fell behind schedule. With the head of the project stepping down in late September, ongoing delays have prompted some opposition lawmakers to question whether the defense budget is being used effectively. Some are now calling for a cut to the project's budget in 2026. Taiwan has formed an AI automotive industry alliance aiming to strengthen local manufacturing through smart tech integration.
那如何结合 ICT 就是我们的强项，就是还要包括我们的智慧化的一些强项，怎么去把这样结合，让 low carbon emission 就是我们低碳的一些排放能够达到。
The alliance was formed by the Taiwan Automotive Research Consortium and the Taiwan Electrical and Electronic Manufacturers Association. It will focus on developing local supply chains, leveraging Taiwan's high-tech capabilities, and expanding its presence in the global market. The world's first Level 3 self-driving bus prototype was also rolled out.
所以我们运用这整个电脑的 AI 控制，一方面监视驾驶员，一方面看附近的环境。如果驾驶员睡着了之后，就可以来控制这个车的转向跟刹车。这就是 Level 3软体来控制硬体。
Taiwan's Industrial Technology Research Institute believes the value of the auto electronics sector will surpass $300 billion by 2029. And coming up after the break, 80 years after the end of the Second World War, we take a look back at a complicated history of Allied prisoners of war held by the Japanese in Taiwan.
你看到他的第一眼，你就知道他是你的，这是一种很奇妙的感觉。
毛小孩就是小孩一样。
他们就是玩到累了，然后休息一下，然后起来再继续玩。
我发现我们的生活好像不能没有狗。
我们就说，其实他们是派来救赎我们的。
快好了，快好了，最后一个了。
饲主其实都很相信我们，因为很相信我们，他对我们就会抱有很大的期望。
他本来不吃饭，经过一番努力之后，他回到他原本该有快乐的样子，哇，超级开心。
愿景就让每一只动物都可以获得好的专科治疗服务。
你要再陪我走10年，好不好？好的话再说一下。
Pup Nation, every Monday, 8:15 p.m. on TaiwanPlus. This month's top hits on TaiwanPlus. More stars, more surprises, even Linsanity. This season, discover the people who make Taiwan shine.
You are not alone. Oh my goodness.
Delve into culinary scenes and meet the unsung heroes behind the flavors you love.
我就是用我的动力去影响我的下一代。
How can this aging power plant transform to create a cleaner future?
我们台湾其实对于电力系统的稳定，因为我们有半导体的产业，这件事情是非常非常的重要。
One heart, one mission.
为国家，为你爱的家人去奋斗。
How did Team Taiwan take one swing and shock the world? Vibrant and original programs exclusively on TaiwanPlus.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. At least 69 people are dead in the central Philippines after a magnitude 6.9 earthquake hit Tuesday night. The epicenter was just off the coast of Cebu Island near Bogo City. Authorities say at least 147 people were injured and 22 buildings were damaged, but they expect these figures to rise as the search for survivors continues. It comes as the region was just beginning to recover from Typhoon Bualoi, which displaced more than 400,000 last week. Many of the injured are being treated outdoors due to the threat of aftershocks. Taiwan says its disaster relief team is prepared to help if Manila seeks international support. Survivors of a dam breach in eastern Taiwan are getting mental health counseling as the search for the missing continues. At least 18 people have died after heavy rains brought by Typhoon Ragasa sent floodwater surging over the dam's banks and into residential areas last week. 6 people are still missing. Over 100 people are injured and many remain in shelters. The suddenness of the flood and the scale of destruction have stunned the local community and put a strain on mental health.
基本上生理方面先稳定下来，那现在的话，大家心理的问题就会慢慢开始出现，就是说心情不好啊，或是睡不着、吃不下，这种情况的时候，我们才会进一步的去协助。
Officials said over 1,000 people have sought help from counselors since they set up mental health care centers. A new report says that Taiwanese imports of some Russian fossil fuels are increasing despite Taipei's vocal opposition to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. As Chris Gorin reports, that raises questions about Taiwan's reliance on foreign energy.
Taiwan may be the largest importer of certain Russian fuels, adding to Moscow's war chest for its invasion of Ukraine. That's according to a new report from environmental and civic groups, including the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air. Lawmakers present at the report's release say relying on Russian fossil fuels could be dangerous for Taiwan.
大家可以知道呢，现在俄罗斯跟中国以往这个外热军人已经不存在了，他们军事的合作也越来越多。而当我们今天在能源的时候呢，既然如果还会再依赖俄罗斯的话，这个依赖性的问题会造成我们这个整个国家安全的危机。
The report concerns Taiwan's imports of naptha, one of the many products created during the distillation of crude oil. It's essential for making plastics and for chemicals used in chip making. The report found that in the first 6 months of 2025, Taiwan imported $1.3 billion of Russian naptha, a 6-fold increase since the war in Ukraine began. In total, since 2022, they say Taiwan imported nearly $5 billion in Russian naptha, leading to enough tax revenues for Russia to buy 170,000 lower-cost drones.
Part of this money would be taxes for export of natural resources, roughly 1.7 billion of American dollars that went straight to Russian budget and that actually spent on war.
The report also found that 96% of those naphtha imports went to a single facility of the private company Formosa Petrochemical Corporation in central Taiwan. In a statement to TaiwanPlus, the company acknowledged that its use of Russian naphtha has increased, and it said that it buys naphtha based on bids with no country of origin restrictions, but it does require sellers to comply with international sanctions and relevant EU regulations. Taiwan's International Trade Administration did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Taiwan has backed Ukraine with aid and diplomacy since Russia's invasion. It has tightened export controls on Russia, and the state power utility says it ended Russian coal purchases in 2022. Yet Taiwan still depends on imported fossil fuels. And while it complies with international sanctions, it has no blanket ban on Russian oil. The report's authors are hoping to see some change.
As a Taiwanese, I'm proud that we stand for human rights and democracy in a lot of matters. But in this particular case, I think we're not acting swiftly and progressively enough. So we do want to see that from private companies and from the government.
While activists call for the phase-out of Russian fossil fuels, it remains to be seen if Taiwan's industries and policymakers will follow through. Ryan Wu and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
Greenpeace says Taiwan still has work to do when it comes to protecting human rights in its fishing industry. The warning follows a new U.S. State Department report on human trafficking, which again ranks Taiwan in the top tier for meeting minimum standards. But the report also flags ongoing concerns about how migrant workers are treated, especially in its distant water fishing fleet. Greenpeace is urging the government to carry out more inspections on vessels and make supply chains more transparent. It comes just days after the U.S. blocked imports of bicycles and parts made by Taiwanese company Giant over allegations of forced labor in the supply chain. In September 1945, Taiwan was witnessing the collapse of its former rulers, the Japanese Empire, and awaiting Republic of China rule. Allied POWs were being liberated across the island, and amid the turmoil, there was little time for anyone to confront the atrocities of the war. Bryn Thomas reports.
80 years ago, Allied prisoners of war were being liberated from across the collapsing Japanese empire.
I was taken prisoner in Singapore, from where I was sent to Thailand and compelled to help build a railway, during which time at least 50% of the people that were sent there died of cholera, dysentery, diphtheria and malnutrition. From Thailand, I returned to Singapore and was embarked on board a Japanese ship which was to take us to Japan.
Throughout September of 1945, former Japanese colonial subjects in Taiwan worked to rescue and feed British and American air and seamen that had, until very recently, been their captives.
And now I've come across Taiwanese in a way, and this is uncomfortable because where I have come across them was as guards on some of what became known as the hell ships. That some of the American POWs were riding on to be sent to Japan.
Located at the geographic center of the Japanese Empire, Taiwan was an ideal transit point for POWs being shipped north to Japan's main island on squalid, airless, overheated ships.
My father came to Taiwan, which of course was Formosa then, and in one of the hell ships, and they held at the docks and kind of humiliated in front of the locals.
Ann Wheeler's father was one of the more than 1,000 POWs forced into slave labor in a mine in the mountains above Keelung, in what is now New Taipei. In total, about 4,000 captured soldiers and airmen were held in 14 camps across the island. The camps were overseen by the Japanese military, but some relied on locals for staffing. Discipline and orders ultimately flowed straight from Tokyo. Just months before the end of the war, 14 Allied airmen were executed here, shot or beheaded on the orders of Japanese authorities. And while they were guarded by Taiwanese prison guards, it was Japanese military police that were carrying out the killings. Today, this is all that's left of the walls of Taipei prison. Now, these walls were built from stones taken from Taipei's old city walls, laid by laborers who had little say as colonial subjects in the future of their city. Still, even under colonial rule, many of the 200,000 Taiwanese who served in the Japanese military volunteered when the call came from Tokyo. They were deployed alongside forced conscripts, taking on roles across Southeast Asia and China.
Before 1941, Japan was mostly focusing on the war in China. And some Taiwanese started to serve and to be recruited as interpreters in China for a good reason, because most Taiwanese were descendants of immigrants from southern China. So they shared common language and culture with people in China, especially in southern China.
And while most translation work was bureaucratic and innocuous, at times it served far darker purposes. Malaysian director Lau Kek Hua has spent years interviewing members of Southeast Asia's Chinese diaspora about the war.
Make use during the situation when they need translation. When you come to Mexico, you need to question people. You need to spot out who are the ones to be killed from the natives, who are the ones to be spared. All those kind of location situation, Taiwanese soldiers would make use because of the language proficiency.
Between 1937 and 1945, up to 20 million civilians were killed under the Japanese Empire through massacres, forced labor, famine, and disease. In Southeast Asia, the death toll included up to 1 million in the Philippines, as many as 4 million in Indonesia, and up to 2 million in Vietnam, along with hundreds of thousands more in what is now Myanmar, Malaysia, and Thailand.
The starved bodies of the liberated people bear witness to the sort of existence left to them by Japan's co-prosperity sphere.
Although Taiwanese were stationed across the empire, many were victims as well as perpetrators, forced into service, some as child soldiers.
Most Taiwanese are kind of stuck
in a colonial system of bad choice A, worst choice B. You don't really have many choices. So I'm not sure it's necessarily Taiwanese not looking at their responsibility until recently. I think it's more an issue of the inability to kind of openly discuss those possibilities and to discuss the historical narrative because that door wasn't open due to martial law.
80 years after the war's end, every Allied POW ever held in Taiwan is now dead, and the generation of Taiwanese that held them captive is fading fast. With first-hand witnesses disappearing, the task of reckoning with Taiwan's wartime past falls to historians, who try to make sense of choices made under extreme circumstances.
I think we need to look into wartime responsibility, not in the legal sense, not even in the political sense, but I think we need to look into wartime responsibility in terms of remembering. And by remembering what Taiwanese had experienced and done during the war, I think it will only help us to better understand the essence and the nature of war.
With Japan collapsing and Republic of China rule just weeks away, September 1945 began a period of rapid change for Taiwan. Peace had come to much of Asia, but its people still faced years of violence and political turmoil, leaving little room to confront wartime responsibility. 80 years later, Taiwan is still shaped by that turbulent past. Yisun Pan, John Su, Jeffrey Chen, and Bryn Thomas for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Be sure to follow our social media for more of our stories. Finally, take a look at 24 hot air balloons flying over a town in southern France. I'm Yvonne Yang. Take care, and I'll see you next time.